She stayed calm. He lost control. By the time he realized who she was, it was already too late. It happened just past 5:40 a.m. in Terminal C of Dallas Love Field Airport. The air smelled like burnt coffee and leftover sanitizer. A baby was crying somewhere behind the gate. Most people were too tired to care. But right by the restricted access hallway near gate C19, something happened that yanked everyone out of autopilot. A man in uniform, a pilot, shoved his way past a woman in heels and a dark blazer. They bumped shoulders. She turned, calm but firm, and said, "Excuse me, watch where you're going." That should have been it. Instead, the man, white, early 40s, tall, crew cut, name tag slightly crooked, stopped in his tracks. He turned slowly, eyes sharp, jaw locked. "You got a problem?" he snapped. The woman didn't blink. "Just asking for some respect." And then it happened. He stepped forward. Too close, the badge on his chest read Captain Mark Ellison. He muttered something under his breath, shook his head, then reached up and slapped her hand away as she reached into her blazer. "She's reaching for something," he shouted, loud enough for security to hear. The slap echoed off the nearby gate walls. Gasps followed. Two bystanders stood up from their seats. One woman instinctively grabbed her child's hand, but the woman didn't flinch. She stepped back, squared her stance, and calmly said, "That was a mistake." Two TSA officers arrived, panting. "What's going on?" one asked. Mark pointed like he'd just caught a fugitive. "This woman's causing trouble. Reached for something when I asked her to step aside." The officers turned to her. She didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She simply reached inside her blazer again, slow and deliberate. This time, she pulled out a leather badge holder. She opened it with a single flick. The light above glinted off the gold. "Chief Monique Langston, Dallas Police Department." Silence. The security officer blinked. "You're the new chief?" "Correct. I'm here for the Federal Aviation Security briefing scheduled at 7 a.m. I just got here." Mark's face turned a shade paler. Passengers started whispering. A man in sweats began filming. One woman muttered, "He's done." And then came the moment. One of the TSA officers turned to Mark. "Sir, please step aside right now." Mark stammered, "Wait, no, she didn't say she was police. She didn't look like what?" The officer interrupted. He paused. That pause said more than any apology ever could. But before anyone could speak again, Chief Langston took a breath and looked him dead in the eyes. "You should sit down. You just made the worst professional decision of your life." But what really pushed him over the edge didn't happen here. That was just the beginning. Mark Ellison hated delays, not just because they messed with his schedule. He could live with a late flight. What he couldn't stomach was feeling out of control. His morning had started off rough. His alarm didn't go off. The Uber driver took the long route. Then the gate agent told him there was a maintenance delay on flight 2849 to Phoenix. "Something with the hydraulics," she'd said with a fake smile. He rolled his eyes and kept walking. Terminal C was already too crowded for this early. A group of teenagers blocked part of the walkway, and some guy in a cowboy hat stood with his arms out like he owned the space. Mark wasn't in the mood for patience. He stormed past people muttering, "Excuse me," but never waiting for them to move. His flight crew was waiting near gate C22, and his co-pilot had texted twice asking if he was close. Mark typed back one word, "Almost." As he turned down the hallway that led to the secured staff access point, he nearly collided with a woman in a navy blazer. She was on the phone, but she stepped aside just in time. Or so he thought. Their shoulders brushed, not enough to knock anyone down, but enough to make Mark whip his head around like she'd thrown something. "Excuse me, watch where you're going," the woman said, calm, cool, clipped. Mark stopped. He was already wired, already on edge. But her tone, measured, confident, hit a nerve he didn't know was exposed. He turned to her and said, "Yeah? How about you watch where you're walking next time?" She raised an eyebrow. "I'm standing still." Mark scoffed and shook his head. "Lady, I don't have time for this." She stepped toward him slowly. "You bumped into me, and now you're shouting." The people around them began to take notice. A gate agent looked up from her screen. A janitor paused with his mop. Then she reached inside her blazer, and Mark, already 2 inches from boiling over, lost all sense. He didn't know what she was reaching for. He didn't wait to find out. In one motion, he slapped her hand down and barked, "Keep your hands where I can see 'em." People gasped. Mark's heart was thumping now, not with fear, but with that adrenaline only anger brings. Then she pulled out her badge, and suddenly his anger gave way to something else. Confusion, and a slow, creeping panic. But Mark wasn't the only one confused. At that moment, half the airport thought they'd just watched a pilot go off the rails on a random woman. The other half thought they saw a power move gone wrong. Nobody had the full picture yet, but they were all watching. Security didn't waste time. 2 TSA agents were already stepping in by the time Mark realized what he'd done. One of them, a younger guy with thick glasses and tired eyes, looked back and forth between the two of them. "Sir, what's going on here?" "She got aggressive," Mark snapped. "Started reaching into her jacket. I was protecting myself." The woman, still composed, still not raising her voice, held up the badge so everyone could see. "I'm Chief Monique Langston. I'm not the one who got aggressive." "Wait, the chief?" one of the agents whispered to the other. She turned her attention to them now. "You should verify my ID before this goes any further." The second TSA officer stepped forward, took the badge, and glanced at it. Then his posture shifted, instantly. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "Understood." Mark looked between them like he'd missed the punchline to a joke. "You're taking her side?" One of the TSA agents shot back. "We're not taking sides. We're taking facts. You just slapped a police officer." Now a crowd had formed. Not a huge one, maybe a dozen people. But it was enough. Phones were out, eyebrows raised. A few airline employees stood frozen behind the customer service counter, watching like they couldn't believe what they were seeing. "You're making a mistake," Mark said. His voice wasn't angry anymore. It was defensive, almost pleading. "How was I supposed to know who she was?" "That's the point," Monique said. She was still standing in the same spot, hands at her sides. "You didn't know who I was, and you still felt entitled to put your hands on me." Mark looked around as if someone might jump in and save him. Nobody did. One of the passengers, an older man in a gray track jacket, called out, "We saw it all. She wasn't doing anything. He just snapped." Another voice chimed in. "I got it on video if y'all need it." Mark's shoulders slumped. He took a small step back. "This is ridiculous." A TSA supervisor arrived just then, a woman with short red hair and a clipboard tucked under her arm. She looked at both of them, then at her agents. "What's the situation?" "Assault," the younger agent said. "Pilot struck a passenger who turned out to be the chief of police." The supervisor blinked. "The chief?" Monique stepped forward. "Yes, I'm here for the joint security briefing. I showed my badge. He hit me before that." Mark shook his head, more to himself than anyone else. She didn't look like law enforcement. The red-haired supervisor's tone turned cold. "And what does law enforcement look like exactly?" Silence again. But this time, the silence didn't feel like confusion. It felt like realization. The damage had been done, and there was no version of this story where Mark came out clean. Mark was still standing in the same spot, but now his stance had changed. He wasn't the assertive, "I run this terminal" kind of guy anymore. His arms were crossed tight across his chest, but not in confidence. More like armor. The red-haired TSA supervisor stepped aside and called someone on her radio. "Yeah, I need airport police at gate C19, ASAP." Mark's eyes darted toward Monique, then toward the phone still recording. "Can we talk about this privately?" he muttered. "No," she said flatly. "You made this public the second you put your hands on me." "Look, I didn't mean—" "You meant something," she cut in. "The way you spoke, the way you moved. That wasn't a mistake. That was a decision." He opened his mouth again, but before he could say anything, 2 uniformed airport police officers showed up. One of them, Officer Jenkins, took one look at Monique and snapped to attention. "Chief Langston?" "Morning," she replied, calm as ever. "Wish I was here under different circumstances." The other officer turned to Mark. "We're going to need you to step over here, sir." Mark scoffed, but he moved, slow, like his legs suddenly weighed more. One of the passengers from earlier, a middle-aged black woman with rollers still in her hair, shook her head and said just loud enough for others to hear, "Betty wouldn't have done that if she was wearing a badge on her chest and had a crew cut like him." No one corrected her. The police took Mark's statement. He tried to spin it. "She reached into her jacket. I reacted. It's protocol." "She reached for her ID," the officer said flatly. "You weren't even part of security. You're a pilot. Not TSA, not law enforcement. Why'd you touch her at all? Mark hesitated. I thought she might be unstable. You thought a woman wearing heels, carrying a briefcase, and walking toward a federal briefing was unstable? Mark looked down at the floor. He didn't answer. Back near the counter, the supervisor asked Monique quietly, "Do you want him detained?" She looked over. He wasn't fighting anymore. He wasn't speaking, just standing there like he was trying to disappear into the wall. "No," she said. "Let the airline deal with him. I'm not here to press criminal charges. I'm here to make a point." The supervisor nodded. Understood. And that's when someone from the airline finally arrived. A man in a navy blazer and a lanyard. He approached Mark, whispered something in his ear. Mark's mouth dropped slightly like he didn't believe what he was hearing. The man whispered again, this time firmer. Mark's face went slack. He turned and looked toward Monique, but she'd already walked away, headed for the conference room in Terminal B, where the briefing would take place. But just as she reached the corner, she turned her head slightly, just enough for him to see her profile. And that small glance said it all. You judged the wrong woman today. The conference room smelled like stale coffee and fresh stress. Fold-out chairs, bottled water, and a projector that kept freezing on the Department of Homeland Security logo. It was barely 7:15 a.m. Monique sat near the front, her face unreadable. She hadn't spoken to anyone about what happened at Gate C-19. Not yet. Her focus now was the job. The room was filled with airport officials, TSA leads, FBI liaisons, but none of them knew what had just gone down 15 minutes ago outside the Starbucks. She adjusted her blazer and tapped her pen against her notebook, zoning out, while a man from the FAA droned on about luggage screening protocols. Her mind wasn't on suitcases, it was on flashbacks. 12 years ago, she wasn't Chief Monique Langston. She was Officer Langston, working late shifts in Fort Worth, the only black woman on her precinct squad, the one always mistaken for admin, for dispatch, for a visiting trainee. One night, after clocking out, she'd been stopped in her own station's parking lot by a rookie, flashlight in her face, hand on his holster. "Ma'am, this is for employees only," he'd barked. She hadn't even gotten mad, not right away. She'd simply shown her badge. He'd laughed it off. Could have fooled me. She remembered going home that night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if the fight to climb the ladder was even worth it. But it was, because she wanted to be seen, not just as a cop, but as someone who earned her place, someone no one could write off again. And yet, here she was, a full chief, and she still got slapped like she was someone's problem. The voice of the speaker brought her back to the room. We'll now hear from Chief Langston, representing Dallas PD and overseeing regional coordination. She stood slowly, clicked her pen, walked up to the front with deliberate calm. "Good morning," she said. "Before I begin, I want to tell you about something that happened to me this morning." The room shifted. People sat up straighter. I was mistaken for a threat by someone who didn't ask questions, didn't assess, just assumed, based on, well, I'll let you guess. A few people already knew what she meant. The others weren't slow, just careful. No one asked me for credentials. No one asked what I was doing, but someone did feel bold enough to put his hands on me. You could have heard a pin drop. I'm not sharing this for sympathy. I'm sharing it because we're here to talk about security. And what good is it if we're only trained to see danger in certain shapes, skin tones, or hairstyles? She let that hang in the air. We've all heard the phrase, if you see something, say something. But maybe the real threat is what people think they see, the lies their fear tells them. Silence again, she smiled tightly. Let's get to work. The applause that followed wasn't loud, but it was real. But outside that conference room, things were already moving behind the scenes. Mark's airline had just placed him on emergency leave. And the video? It had started making its way across social media, one share at a time. By 10:30 a.m., Mark Ellison's name wasn't just trending in the airline's internal HR system. It was spreading across group chats, Reddit threads, and a video titled, "Pilot Hits Woman, Realizes She's Police Chief," that had already hit 80,000 views. The clip wasn't even 40 seconds long. Shaky phone footage, Mark slapping Monique's hand, her calm reaction, the badge flash, the officer saying, "You just hit a cop." That's all it took. The airline didn't wait. They pulled him from duty. Flight 2849 was assigned a new captain, and passengers were given a vague reason about a crew reassignment. But inside the walls of the airline's operations office, it was chaos. Mark sat alone in a gray conference room on the second floor. His blazer was off. His pilot wings sat on the table. A clipboard and a cup of water in front of him. HR hadn't said much yet, but the legal team was already in the loop. He stared at the wall, motionless. When they finally entered, it was just two people. Rachel Frey from HR and Daryl Knox from Risk Management. No smiles, no handshakes. Rachel cleared her throat. "Captain Ellison, we're placing you on immediate suspension pending investigation." He didn't react. Daryl leaned forward. "You assaulted someone in uniform. That alone is grounds for termination. The fact that she's a police chief and that the incident was filmed puts us in a legal firestorm." Mark finally spoke. "I didn't know who she was." "That's not a defense," Daryl said, not even looking up. "It's the problem." Mark pressed his hands against his forehead. "I wasn't trying to hurt her. I just reacted." Rachel asked, "What were you reacting to exactly?" He paused, then quietly, "She looked confrontational. Her tone." She stepped toward me. "Her tone?" Daryl echoed. "Do you realize how weak that sounds?" Mark leaned back. "I'm not a racist, if that's what you're getting at." Rachel shut her folder. "That's not the point. The point is, you were aggressive with a black woman in a professional setting, in public, without provocation. And your excuse is her tone?" Mark didn't respond. Meanwhile, back at the police briefing, Monique was wrapping up. She didn't bring up the incident again, not because she didn't care, but because she'd already said enough. She knew the consequences would ripple with or without her. Her phone buzzed, a text from her assistant. "Media wants a comment. Local news has it now. So does Channel 4. She sighed, tucked the phone away. She wasn't surprised. She also wasn't afraid. At 2:15 p.m., the airline issued a carefully worded statement. "We are aware of the incident involving one of our pilots and a city official earlier today at Dallas Love Field. We are cooperating fully with law enforcement and have placed the pilot on leave pending a full review. We do not tolerate aggression, bias, or behavior that compromises passenger or public trust." It was clinical, safe, but people saw through it. Comments poured in. "He should be fired." Imagine if roles were reversed. This is exactly why people don't trust authority. But Monique didn't want revenge. She wanted responsibility. And that was the part Mark still didn't understand, until the phone call he got the next day. The call came at 8:06 the next morning. Mark didn't answer the first time. He stared at the screen, watched the number disappear. No voicemail, no text, just silence. But when it rang again, a minute later, from the same number, he picked up. "Mark Ellison?" "Yes." "This is Chief Monique Langston." He sat up. "Listen, I was told not to speak directly to you. I didn't expect—" "I'm not calling to argue," she said. "I'm calling because I was asked to mediate an internal discussion between the city and your airline. They want to know how far I want to take this." Mark rubbed his eyes. "And?" "I could press charges, but I'm not." He waited. There had to be a but. "I'm not letting it slide either," she continued. "You're not going to lose your job today. Not because I'm sparing you, because I want you to learn something instead of just walking away bitter and unaccountable." "I'm not bitter," he said. "Mark, when you looked at me in that terminal, you didn't see a professional. You didn't see someone who might outrank you. You saw a problem, and you treated me like one." He didn't speak. She pressed on. "And the thing is, I don't think you're a monster. I think you're a man who's lived a very comfortable life, one where you haven't had to check your assumptions. Until now." Mark's voice came quieter this time. "I've worked hard to get where I am." "So have I," she said. "That's why it matters that you slapped my hand before asking a single question. That's why your airline's facing PR fallout and legal meetings and public pressure, not because of me, but because of you." He was quiet again. She continued. "They're offering you a chance to keep flying, but they're going to require something. You'll go through training, accountability sessions, and you're going to publicly acknowledge what you did. You want me to apologize on camera? I want you to understand why you should." He let out a slow breath. You're right. About all of it. I didn't think. I saw someone stand in my way and I snapped. And you'll think next time, that's the point. There was a pause. Then he said something he hadn't said to anyone yet. Not to HR, not to his lawyer. I'm sorry. Genuinely. Monique didn't thank him. She didn't soften. She just said, let's see what you do with that. The call ended. 2 weeks later, Mark sat in front of a camera, wearing a white shirt, no uniform, no pilot wings, no script. He spoke for 4 minutes. No excuses, no deflection. He explained what happened. He admitted he judged someone based on nothing. He looked directly at the lens and said, what I did wasn't about security. It was about ego and bias I didn't realize I had. People had opinions. Some called it fake. Others called it growth. But Monique watched it from her office and didn't care what anyone else thought. She saw what she needed to see, because real change doesn't come from punishment. It comes from reflection, and from people being forced to face themselves when it's no longer easy to look away. If this story made you feel something, sit with that. Ask yourself, who do you instinctively mistrust, and why? If you caught yourself thinking, this would never happen to me, then maybe you've been lucky, not right. Share this story, talk about it, and most importantly, check your assumptions before they become someone else's consequences.